Bauer's Secret Combinations. Introduction. Welcome to the highlights of Ken Bauer's Hiding in Plain Sight, Unmasking the Secret Combinations of the Last Days. Highlights by Nate Richardson, available at richardsonstudies.com. Here we will paraphrase many quotes and ideas from the book. Heber J. Grant said, Satan is working, quote, under such perfect disguises that many do not recognize him or his methods, end quote, to destroy economic, political, and religious freedom. Quote, without knowing it, the people are being urged down paths that lead only to destruction, end quote. Doctrine and Covenants, section 10, verse 36 through 37 says, you cannot always tell the wicked from the righteous. Ezra Taft Benson said, those who are complacent in the fight for liberty, going with popularity, lament it. It's like a Punch and Judy puppet show. No matter what the script is, eventually they will end up punching each other. J. Edgar Hoover said there is a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. A German professor explains gradual habitation tactics used in Germany by Hitler. They took over by a slow process that people don't notice until it seems to come down all at once. Ezra Benson in the Ensign said, quote, a secret combination seeks to overthrow the freedom of all lands, nations, and countries, increasing its evil influence and control over America and the entire world, end quote. Bruce R. McConkie said, quote, Gadianton robbers fill the judgment seats in many nations. An evil power seeks to overthrow all nations and countries. Satan reigns in the hearts of men. It is the day of his power, end quote. George Bush says, we are getting a quote, new world order. The winds of change are with us now, end quote. Former Soviet President Gorbachev said, get rid of old thinking and put in a new world order. Bowers, Chapter 1. There is no conspiracy, so there. 2 Nephi, Chapter 28, verse 22 says, the devil tells people lies by whispers until they are chained in hell. Ether, Chapter 5, verse 1 says, quote, it is the wisdom in God that these things should be known unto you, end quote. This refers to secret combinations, the theme of the next part of this text. Ether, Chapter 8, verse 24 says, quote, awake to a sense of your awful situation, because of this secret combination which shall be among you, end quote. J. Edgar Hoover says, it is essential to know what you are fighting for and what you are fighting against, or you'll be unmotivated and confused. David O. McKay said, we are endorsed educational means to awaken people to investigate communism. Alma, Chapter 37, verse 25 says, quote, I will bring to light all their secrets and abominations unto every nation that shall hereafter possess the land, end quote. Joseph Smith History, Chapter 1, verse 22 says, the preachers were, quote, all united to persecute me, end quote. Ezra Taft Benson says, quote, we cannot fully live the gospel and not be fully involved in the fight for freedom, end quote. Several whistleblowers who have left the conspiracy groups report and write of it. Bowers, Chapter 2, The Golden Rule. He who has the goal makes the rules. James A. Madison said money changers use every form of abuse to get power. They maintain control over governments by controlling the money and the insurance of it. Founding fathers of U.S. wanted free enterprise capitalism. The book gives a historical example of socialism causing less good produces more workers, compared to capitalism, where less people make more goods since the capitalists are motivated to work. Socialism doesn't consider human nature. Ezra Taft Benson said, the free enterprise system is built on the internal principle of freedom of choice. Marky Peterson in the Church News said, the U.S. Constitution stands for free initiative. West Germany once it eliminated almost all controls on wages and price, came back from poverty to one of the strongest economies. Communist countries all experience shortage of goods because of wage and price controls. Freedom is wired into people. Most are willing to die for it. Note, interestingly, the last days have been the best and worst of people. It appears that the worst is manifested by an unwillingness to stand up for agency, aka liberty. Back to the text. The super rich always think they're above others. The origins of the Rothschilds family and their international bank is presented. Hugh Nibley said Satan will buy everything on earth and claim it all, putting a price tag on it and offering it to everyone. Info was given on how top bankers control governments, for example, by refraining from renewing treasury bills. They choose who can obtain and borrow money. They advise government people on what's good for themselves, but despite it being bad for government. The Rothschilds engineered the French Revolution by manipulation, then they got control over France. International bankers hold secret meetings. Thomas Jefferson said, private banks can control inflation, then deflation, which will cause people to lose their property. Note, that is certainly happening today. Remember, the Federal Reserve is a private bank. Back to the text. Interest represents a gradual transfer of wealth from society to banks. The fractional reserve banking system allows this. People have become less rich overall because of it. Often it takes two incomes to provide now. In the 1920s through the 1940s, 90% of Americans owned their homes, but today 30-year loans are common. Nations usually collapse when a small percent of the population owns all the wealth. Babylon fell when 3% had all the wealth. Persia fell when 2% had all the wealth. Greece fell when 5% had all the wealth. Rome fell when 2,000 people had all the wealth. In America, it is less than 2% own 90% of all the wealth. The New York Times said, one world order can only come by a small percent of the population absorbing all the wealth. The Federal Reserve never allowed itself to be audited. They killed Representative Lewis McFadden when he tried to get the Fed audited. Details are given on creation of the Fed, who was involved, and what their original intent was. They now control all financial transactions in the U.S. Woodrow Wilson said after he passed the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, quote, I have unwittingly ruined the country. I have unwittingly ruined my country, end quote. Info on the BIS, Bank for International Settlements, IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank are given. BIS secret meetings take place in Switzerland, where 13 shape the whole world's economy. They are financial barons who control the world's supply of money. These organizations give loans to places they know will not ever be able to pay, then destroy their economies. Massive debt leads to nations into the New World Order. Socialism is forced upon indebted countries to wreck their economies. Joseph Stiglitz proposed an economic plan to help third world countries rather than getting them in debt than crushing them, and was fired by President Clinton. It is shown how the IRS, International Revenue Service, income tax money goes to the pockets of the bankers, not into taking care of roads, schools, and other public things. Spencer W. Kimball said about the Latter-day Saints paying their taxes that if they don't like the taxes, they should go against it in the politically correct ways of due process of law. They shouldn't just stop paying taxes they don't agree with. Ezra Taft Benson said it is possible that the government manipulators who brought economic crisis are hoping that we will come to them begging for help, offering our civil rights in exchange. Alexander Hamilton said, quote, nothing is more common than for free people in times of heat and violence to gratify momentary passions by letting into the government principles and precedents which afterwards prove fatal to themselves, end quote. Quoted in Ezra Benson, quote, an enemy hath done this, end quote. And that is the end of chapter 1 through 3, and we will do more recordings later. This was read by Beth Richardson.